F-22 Raptor vs YF-23. The Advanced Tactical Fighter competition, staged at the early of the 1980s, yielded a pair of remarkable fighter designs. The United States would eventually select the F-22 Raptor, widely acknowledged as the most capable air superiority aircraft of the early 21st century. The loser, the YF-23, now graces museums in Torrance, California, and Dayton, Ohio. How did the Pentagon decide on the F-22, and what impact did that decision have? We will never know, but going with the F-22 Raptor may have saved the Pentagon some major headaches. The YF-23 included some characteristics that may eventually find themselves in a sixth-generation fighter, or perhaps in the Air Force's Deep Interceptor intended to support B-21 raiders on the way to their targets. For example, the V-tail aspect has been mentioned in some of the early conceptualization for a sixth-generation fighter. And Boeing will undoubtedly harken back to its experience with the YF-23 when thinking about its next fighter in future. ATF competition. The origins of the ATF competition came in the early 1980s, when it became apparent that the Soviets were planning to field fighters, the MiG-29 and the Su-27, capable of competing effectively with the U.S. Air Force's F-15 and F-16. The ATF would allow the U.S. to re-establish its advantages, potentially on grounds, notably stealth, where the Soviets would struggle to compete. The success of either of the ATF competitors was overdetermined. The Soviet Union disappeared during the course of the competition, and the major European aerospace powers largely declined to compete on the same terrain: stealth, supercruise and eventually sensor fusion. Either the F-22 or the YF-23 would become the finest fighter of the early 21st century. The only question was which aircraft would win the investment of DoD. And each plane had its advantages. The YF-23 enjoyed superior supercruise, and in some accounts better stealth performance, over the F-22. The F-22 offered a somewhat simpler, less risky design, along with an extraordinary degree of agility that made it an awesome fighter. As Dave Majumdar pointed out a year ago, political and bureaucratic factors contributed to the selection of the F-22. Fed up with Northrop and the still independent McDonnell Douglas in the wake of the B-2 and A-12 projects, the Pentagon preferred Lockheed. The U.S. Navy disliked the YF-23 for idiosyncratic reasons, and hoped it would get a crack at a heavily modified F-22. For its part, the Air Force preferred the gaudy maneuverability of the F-22, which gave it an advantage in nearly every potential combat situation. Had the YF-23 enjoyed a smoother development path, the fighter might not have faced such a hostile environment as it entered service. But given that the YF-23 was generally perceived to be the more innovative, and therefore riskier, design, and that it had a slightly higher price tag, the chances that it could have sailed through without a hitch are correspondingly low. And trouble with design and production might have left the U.S. Air Force with even fewer operational fighters. Had the ATF competition not taken place coincident with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1980s, the YF-23 might have stood a chance for resurrection. Some of its characteristics were sufficiently advanced that they could have drawn further attention and investment. As is the case with the X-32, the YF-23 never faced the most dramatic problems to afflict the F-22 Raptor. It never experienced cost overruns, technology failures, software snafus, or pilot-killing respiratory issues. Those problems, which regularly afflict new defense projects, in fairness, the pilot suffocation is largely idiosyncratic to the Raptor, were consequential. The YF-23 V-tail aspect has been mentioned in some of the early conceptualization for a next-generation fighter. And Boeing will undoubtedly harken back to its experience with the YF-23 when thinking about its next fighter. Thank you for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe.